And welcome to Abstract Essay, where the essay shape plot finds out and every conversation explores the art of thinking beyond the obvious. And today I have my special guest. He is an American artist, an author, and a constitutional activist, none other than Mr. Julian Raven. Welcome, Mr. Julian on Abstract Essay. And can you please introduce more about yourself that I miss?
Well, good evening, Daniel. Thank you for having me on. What did I miss? Or what did you miss? Well, there's a lot to the
Yes.
story, and if you focus in on the constitutional aspect, um, my journey that is that part of my life right now is now nearly a decade long legal fight against the Smithsonian Institution in Washington D.C. I'm in my third lawsuit, and it is a really a life changing experience that I have been on, and the answers have still not been given properly.
Hmm. So, Mr. Julian Raven, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. And today, let's talk about public trust for federal seal, the constitutional mystery of the Smithsonian. So, tell us what it's all about.
Well, the Smithsonian Institution is a highly regarded national museum here in the United States. And unfortunately, what's happened since its founding is that the government has taken over the museum because the government originally established the museum in 1846. But the museum was founded by a private English gentleman by the name of James Smithson. And when he died in the United Kingdom, he gave his fortune to the United States. He gave his fortune to Washington, D.C., that at Washington, D.C., this is what it says in his will, there would be an establishment of a institution called the Smithsonian Institution for the increase and diffusion of knowledge. And the US Congress accepted the responsibility to be the trustee of that private institution. That was the founding. It's in the founding documents from 1846, the Smithsonian Act of Congress. And it says quite clearly in the first few sentences that the government of the United States is merely the trustee. They function as a trustee of a charity, a trustee of a church, nonprofit organization. They are a trustee of the James Smithson estate or the James Smithson bequest. Nothing more than that. And what's interesting is the original founding secretary, the gentleman who was a scientist and by the name of Joseph Henry, who built the Smithsonian. He was the first employee of the Smithsonian official to run it, and he gave 37 years of his life to doing that. He wrote in the vision charter of the museum in 1848 that a couple of years later, when the museum got off the ground and started operating, that it was not and never a government institution or a national establishment, meaning at that time there were already people trying to make out that this is a government organization, this is a government agency, this is made for and by the government, and nothing could be further from the truth. So he made sure it was written in the act of the Smith, not the act of the Smithsonian, what's called the program of organization of the Smithsonian Institution, that the Smithsonian is not and has never been a national establishment, meaning it's not a government agency. But what's happened is because it's so close to Washington, D.C., it's right there on the mall, and because of its influence and historic participation in telling the American story, it is the premier American historic storytelling engine. And because of that, it has been basically co opted. It has drifted without legislation into federal control because it was the federal government that took the responsibility to be the trustee. But instead of being just the trustee, they've taken over the museum and now have claimed it as a national, meaning government or federally created agency. And it's completely wrong and it's completely illegal. And so, my question, now going on 10 years, to the court, to the government, but especially to the court through the courts, is to demand that ultimately the US Supreme Court declare exactly what is the Smithsonian Institution. I've been to the Supreme Court once, 2019, and they refused to hear my appeal. The main problem they have is because the chancellor of the Smithsonian Institution is the Chief Justice of the US Supreme Court, John Roberts. So it's a very complicated problem that they've created because they're trying to pretend that it's a government agency. Everybody believes it's a government agency. If you look on the screen there, Daniel, that screenshot of that old Sunday Star newspaper, are you looking at that too?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
That article is from 1926, I believe it is, and it is the Washington newspaper. And what I have highlighted in green, it's a front page story about the Smithsonian, and the story basically says a family from the Midwest, they go to Washington, D.C., they walk on the mall, they see the Smithsonian buildings, and they think, wow, what a government institution, what a government museum. And the article says, and they're completely wrong. It says it right there, in highlighted in the green box at the bottom. It says it is a privately endowed and privately financed museum. Basically, the government of the United States is merely the trustee to carry out the design of the testator. In other words, the government of the United States is merely the trustee to carry out the will of James Smithson. If it was a federal agency, it would exercise government power to carry out the will of the federal government. And it's not, it's right there. So, this whole article from 1926, he was saying exactly what I'm arguing. And yet, people have become so brainwashed because that story is from 1926, saying exactly what I have been dealing with for 10 years, quoting people who thought it was a government agency in 1926. So the confusion goes right back to the beginning. And because of its proximity to the government in Washington, D.C., it has, by absorption, become confused with the government. And then people, for all sorts of reasons, have taken over the museum to control it for the government. All the while, it's private property, the private property of James Smithson, who gave his property to the United States to establish a private institution called the Smithsonian Institution. It's not very complex. That's what it is. It's right in the founding document. But it's such a an example of bureaucratic drift where an institution without the right direction can be co-opted by the government, and basically the government is violating the constitutional rights of James Smithson because the Fourth Amendment and the Fifth Amendment to the US Constitution speak about property rights. There can be no unreasonable searches or seizures of somebody's property, or the Fifth Amendment talks about there must be In order to be deprived of your property, there must be the due process of law. Even the 14th Amendment under the Equal Protection, um, where citizens are guaranteed equal process, due process. James Smithson has had, because he's dead, he's had his and his rights of being the testator did not die, because his will is what controls the Smithsonian. And if there's no one to defend his will, he's a dead guy, and there's no one here. And he was from England. He didn't have any family here, et cetera, et cetera. So the government's just got away with this. And I happen to be somebody who, by destiny, by the hand of God in my life, just the way He led me, I happen to be English or of English origin myself as well, have ended up being the defender of James Smithson's will and fighting it out against the government, because even the courts, the federal courts, since my first lawsuit, are and have been continually wrong and confused about the status. And that's what's so hard to swallow, because you go to the court hoping that they would be the ones to say, oh, it's right there, it's in black and white, it's no argument here, it's very clear. They couldn't. And this judge made up his ruling without citing any laws. He just made it. It's so bizarre when you read it. And now that same judge is adjudicating my third lawsuit. And I have 4 motions right now in the federal court on 2 cases, on the original case from 2018 and my new case from 2025. And they're now before the same judge. His name is Judge Trevor N. McFadden. There are 4 motions now on the docket as we speak, and one of them has reopened the 2018 case and is asking that judge to vacate his ruling under Rule 60B, I believe it is, of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, where in the courts, a judge can vacate and annul or delete his verdict and eliminate it from the record as wrong. He made a terrible mistake. The Supreme Court didn't say yes or no, they just didn't hear it. They just refused to hear the case. So the judge has the opportunity to correct the record right now and vacate his ruling. And then my other 3 motions bring that case, the issues of that first case, into the new case, which is already dealing with the same question, but now loads it up with the original question from a different perspective. And he now has 3 motions to reconsider and to notice that case into this new case, and then move forward with adjudicating once again according to what's written. Or he has a motion there to say he was involved in the first case, he messed it up basically, and he's biased against me. He has to recuse himself. And so I've given him a strategic roadmap to either fix the mess he made and rule correctly, clarify the status of the Smithsonian, or recuse himself and get out of the case and hand it to another judge, because it was already transferred from one judge back to him. And now he has the responsibility to fix the problem that he created with his, like he was one of these people in this news article. He had no idea. He was a young judge. It was like his second case that he tried in 2018. He was 37 years old. He was clueless. And he ruled, he basically made it up. And when you read it, you can see he just made it up because he didn't quote any laws to prove his theory. He just said, oh, no, the Smithsonian's the government, blah, 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 without citing any laws to prove it. And it's rubbish. It's just absolutely rubbish. So there's my
So,
introduction, Daniel.
so Mr. Julian, the phrase federal shield implies the institutions has been used to conceal things. What are the most compelling theories about what the Smithsonian might be shielding from the public, whether the archaeological finds, technological artifacts, or something else?
Well, I've seen there's obviously a lot of sort of conspiracies about those things, and I'm not someone who I don't get into conspiracy because you can imagine all sorts of things that they could be holding, and it's I'm a Christian, and this is a verse in the book of Timothy, Second Timothy 2, chapter 22 and 23, I believe it says, avoid foolish and ignorant speculations because they produce quarrels among men. And as much as there may be all sorts of conspiracies that are actually true, or we'll only find out when you actually get in there. And so from the outside, because I think what you highlight is the fact about the wall, the shield, the and it's not a federal shield. The institution has taken advantage of its confused status, and it has made itself legally impenetrable. It is a fortress. It is a legal um it is legally untouchable right now. I'm the only person that's ever sued the Smithsonian like I've done. I'm the only person that's ever sued the Smithsonian and appealed all the way to the Supreme Court. So I've pushed and pushed and pushed, and because I'm just a average guy, they don't take me very seriously because I'm dealing with such immense institutional power, massive. And because it's right there inside the federal world, it is it's like the playground for government officials or important, very wealthy people in the United States. It's a very powerful organization, and they don't want accountability. They don't want public accountability, and they have made themselves impenetrable. And because of that, these conspiracies arise because if you, for example, try to file what's called a FOIA, are you familiar with that? A FOIA report. It's a
Mm-hmm.
Freedom of Information Act that you can file against the government. You can't file it against the Smithsonian because it's not the government. You try to file it, and they say, "No, we don't obey that because we're not the government." But then in court, they'll say, "Oh, yeah, but we are the government." And so it's like a hybrid creature, right now. In my book, if you read my book, which we discussed, excuse me, at the beginning, Odious and Cerberus. Cerberus is the mythical three-headed hound dog from hell from Greek mythology. And this organization is like that beast because the Board of Regents that controls the Smithsonian Institution is appointed by Congress. And the Board of Regents, like I said, is made up of the Chief Justice, John Roberts of the US Supreme Court, the Vice President of the United States, three members of Congress, three members of the Senate, and then nine members of the public. And these are very wealthy, successful people from the American public. So the Board of Regents is this board of very, very influential and powerful people, but they don't want accountability. And they have got away with it for so long until I came along with my lawsuits. And now the scrutiny is there. Thank God there's very good coverage in the media, not as good as it could be because most of the media is confused as well. But this year was the most important year of my case because the president came out and fired Kim Sayat, who was the former director of the National Portrait Gallery, in May 30th of 2025. She was the reason why I sued the Smithsonian in the first place back in 2017, January the 1st, basically, of 2017. She was the reason because of her unbelievable partisan animosity against me, wanting to show my pro Trump at the time portrait of Donald Trump. I then sued her. That's a whole other story. And it took 8 years for somebody to actually say, yes, she's highly partisan. And the president of the United States, my case was number 4 on the White House list of 17 reasons to fire her. And this is what's amazing is when he fired her, she didn't leave. She went back to work the next day. So the most important or the most powerful man in the world fires Kim Sayed, but she ignores him and goes back to work. And the only reason why she could do that is, what do you think?
Because he's not a part of the government.
That's it. It's a private institution. It's like trying to fire a pastor of a church. The president has no authority to fire her. He might have good reason. He might have, like you said, she's a highly partisan person. That's true. That was the verdict in my case in 2018. But that he doesn't have the power to fire her. So she went back to work the next day. And then a few days later, the Smithsonian Board of Regents, they met. And in a New York Times article, which my story was mentioned in as well, the story speaks about a congressman in that meeting, because remember, there's 3 members of Congress and 3 members of the Senate. The congressman was demanding that they fire Kim Sayed. And John Roberts, the chancellor, basically told him to be quiet. And they're already dealing with it in another way or something like that. So the Smithsonian Board of Regents, they rebuff the president of the United States. So if the Smithsonian was the government, it's like there's no way that this could be even happening because the vice president was sitting there. You know, J.D. Vance is sitting at that meeting when they tell the president, without saying it, you can't fire Kim Sayed. And he's sitting there. So it's so, and then the next day, the Smithsonian came out with a statement and they said, we're a private entity, they said we're an independent entity which is true. But in court, they have argued they are the government through and through. And that's what the judge in my case ruled. So when I've now opened up the old case, I have said there are extraordinary circumstances which say, look, the president of the United States tried to fire this woman, and she went back to work the next day. This is not the government. And then the Smithsonian came out and said, we're independent. And the president had no power. And that woman eventually quit, like I said she would. They would force her to quit because of the embarrassment that she is to the institution. So it's a fascinating story. If you didn't read the book, I would encourage you to read my book, Odious and Cerberus, An American Immigrant's Odyssey and His Free Speech Legal War Against Smithsonian Corruption. The book tells the most of that story. It tells the first 7 years. It doesn't say what's gone on this year. That's going to be a second edition that's going to come out. But that is the most important source of documented information about what I'm saying. And you can read it for yourself and say, yeah, he ain't making it up. It's right there. It's right there in black and white. So I have faith that this journey, as long and as difficult and as disappointing that it's been, which it has been, very, very discouraging, because I'm the type of person that just expects people to just do the right thing and say, look, it's right there. It says it right there. There's no argument here. It's right there. Look, read it. And then they won't read it and they'll make up something. That's very discouraging when it happens at the highest level of the judicial system in the United States. So that's what happens. That's when politics and prestige and institutional inertia control the truth or the lack of truth. They control the lie. So all of those things go back to your question about, the conspiracies. Those conspiracies exist because of this legal impenetrability for now that the Smithsonian Institution has.
Mr. Julian, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season. Abstract poverty in second season, and my book 101 review in fifth season too. Comedy 101 in second season, and my food 101 in fifth season as well. Geography 101, Love Letters Movie 101, and Music 101 are in fourth season, and my baby podcast Law 101, Mental Health and Bible Verses 101, Science 101, and Sex 101 in its second season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So Mr. Julian ultimately is the constitutional mystery of the Smithsonian in the story about a benign institution struggling with a massive mandate, or is it a more profound tale about control of history? Mr. Julian?
Yes, I'm here.
Yes, so that's my last question.
Oh, go ahead. I thought you were closing up. I'm sorry. Say that again.
So ultimately, is the constitutional mystery of the Smithsonian is a story about a benign institution struggling with a massive mandate, or is it more profound tale about the control of history?
That's, I think, where you can land. I think it's obviously as a storytelling engine, there is always a big fight over who controls the Smithsonian because who controls the Smithsonian controls the history that's being written.
Indeed, Mr. Julian Raven. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and wisdom to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your advocacy, your projects, or anything you want to promote on Abstract Essay?
Well, thank you. Yeah, my website there is www.smithsoninstitution.com.
Yes, people, let's support Mr. Julian Raven, because if you support him, for sure more and more empowering advocacy to come. So, Mr. Julian, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Daniel.
Morticon people, see you soon.